Witnessing is what we're going to be talking about today. I wonder what it actually means, though, like literally and metaphysically. So, I know in Islam, I didn't talk about the first sort of pillar that kind of holds up the whole foundation of the religion or the faith as it is. And it's called Shahada, which means to kind of witness. Um, it's difficult to kind of give it any kind of one broad definition, but what it is basically to understand that when something resonates with you, like music sometimes, like sometimes you're going through a difficult day and you put the music on and it just speaks to you, you're just like, oh, that, right? That is a type of of resonance where everything kind of just aligns for you and it has a very spiritual internal meaning for you. People have that in different kinds of forms, right? So typically, if you're thinking of something as a cause and effect with regards to some kind of metaphysical promise, and you see that it actually comes to fruition, then you know that there is a big force in the world. And that witnessing is almost like, okay, I can't ignore this, right? Some people choose to because they're just like, am I being paranoid? And then they go to pseudoscience and then they don't even know how to identify it in any kind of language because religion all just offshoots into who knows what anymore. So they kind of just let it go and they kind of maybe ignore it. But that is what it is. It's a type of witnessing that your soul kind of remembers something like, and that sometimes like going back to what I was talking about yesterday with like lamenting and feeling a little bit sad sometimes. Sometimes that's what I feel like. I'm like, is my soul kind of missing a certain meaning in the world? And it's almost like, where do I find it again? So anyway, just something to think about. And the kind of analogy that I drew to it, just to kind of make it something that's analogous to anybody's context or any kind of situation, is think about fireworks, right? So let's pretend someone is new to the Western world as it is, and they're reading something about popular culture and they're reading about celebrations. So then they read, there are times throughout the year where people are happy to get into gatherings and watch fire explode in the sky in an artistic way. They do it in a safe way, but it's really, really loud. And people are happy to do this. So, without any pictures or anything, what do you think the reaction would be? So, you can think about that for a minute and just be like, for the common person, we're like, yeah, we know what that's fireworks. That's not a big deal. But to somebody who's completely new to this, just to read it and not actually witness it firsthand, would be like, I don't know how to think of that. So they might actually go to another person who's like, this is a norm for them and say, can you believe these people, what they do? And so the person would say, yeah, I've done it. And we do it all the time. And, wait until this. So still, they're going to be kind of like, no. So think about that type of reassurance and that type of witnessing as it is. Like this person's just read about it and assumes like, kind of skeptical. I don't even know. Maybe I'll have to wait and see it for myself. Whereas another person is like, I can show you pictures and, he'll be like, nah, it's Photoshop, I don't know. So this is basically what I'm talking about when you say, how do I decide for myself what to believe? And why don't you just tell me what to believe? And this is exactly it. Religion tends to get maligned for this reason, is that if I have my anecdotal story and I know it's working for me and I know that it's true for me, I can't scientifically validate that. It's just my anecdote. There's no way to say that your exact scenario is replicable. So it's not really valid for anyone outside of yourself right now, right? So that's why when you go into empirical sciences or the hard sciences, they won't really talk about God in that sense. They may talk about it in a kind of like a philosophical way, like in psychology. I think that's the extent of it. In the humanities, it's a completely different thing. It's kind of more of a study of what religion does for people as an aim. So how like it kind of groups people and then they share a certain goal. And being in a group helps them reinforce meaning together. So that kind of can lead to a type of zeitgeist like we talked about, which is kind of like something you're just gonna have to contend with. And so I think that's kind of what it is that in that gray area where some people they're like finagling, like is this pseudoscience? I wouldn't really call it pseudoscience because it doesn't really have anything that's like some kind of big claim. Like if you do this, this is the immediate result and it's going to give you money, it's going to make you rich. It's just not like that at all. It has nothing to do with magic. It has nothing to do with trying to raise the dead or anything like that. It's just I'm trying to find meaning, and I know that the universe is way too big and has way too many proofs for its self-sustaining sort of nature that it's so intelligible. Like it can't just be chaos. So that's the way I think about it, and I don't think about the nature of God as it were in any kind of way. I just think of it as light, like I mentioned before, and that kind of just closes my mind up from delving into something that I know I'm just never going to find an end to. So bringing me to the next kind of segue out of fasting, which is kind of holding yourself accountable to something that's like a daily practice, and then trying to see what the result of it is. So it's almost like building a habit because I want to achieve a certain aim, and then seeing if this habit's actually worthwhile keeping. If, for example, you're working on something that's like a personal goal, like I want to see if I can build up my endurance. So I used to be able to run for 15 minutes. Maybe now I want to see if I can run for 25 minutes. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll decide that I read up a little bit and some article tells me something about, well, you have to do this for this amount of time and then your endurance will build up. So if I do all those things and my endurance does actually build up, then there we go, right? Like I've got something that worked for me and I can now kind of measure it in a certain way. So charity is very difficult to measure. It's actually almost impossible. So if I say I have $100 in my bank account right now, I am an 18-year-old who's just starting a part-time job, and someone tells me that, I'm going to this charity event. Do you want to come with me? Your immediate response might be like, I don't have enough money. I don't really want to go. So that's good, because typically it's just like, all right, that's an honest answer and that's it. Within religion, sometimes people will argue to kind of persuade you. They'll say, but you know what? Charity doesn't actually diminish from your wealth. It'll actually increase it. And to anybody, they'll just be like, oh, okay, well, like that's not even intuitive. Like I don't even know what to say to that. And so that's why I think sometimes people shy away from talking about religion anymore. Like I personally kind of promote this as almost to say, if you already know that your group of people or friends or like circle of trust isn't really always open to talking about religion, if they haven't already kind of decided to think about meaning on their own, kind of just throwing these at them are, I've found sometimes like, maybe they might be food for thought. Maybe they'll think about it. If not, I mean, at least you try. You're not really pushing it any particular way. But from what I've, again, kind of witnessed is that charity isn't just about money. It's, in Islam, it's actually a way of uplifting a person in any kind of walk of life. Now, think about that. That's really, really broad, right? So if I'm having, like when I was at university, I think it was my second year. So when I was in university, I had a friend who was from the Baha'i tradition, and at one point I was just walking by, and she happened to be kind of just standing there, and she looked really deep in thought. Like she had this kind of withdrawn face, just like really, really sad. And I walked by, and I was just like, "Oh, hey!" And then I guess it kind of jarred her from her thoughts, and she's like, "Hey." And then I kept walking. I might have just been going to class or something, but reflecting on it afterwards was just like, yeah, she does kind of look sad. But anyway, she texted me after, sent me a message after, and she's like, you never know what a smile can do for somebody. And to me, at the moment, it was just like, I kind of tend to just have kind of like a joyful countenance, or I used to, and I know sometimes when I have like a resting face, I can look kind of grumpy or I look sad. So I assume that of other people. I'm just like, I can never really know anyone's actual mood or state of mind, right? But to me at the time, it kind of just spoke volumes. It was just like, charity does have, like, it's kind of like an endless and directionless kind of paying it forward, as it were. So if it goes anything from a smile, lifting somebody's mood, to relieving someone from debt. So if someone is, for example, like a struggling student or a new parent and they're struggling to kind of make ends meet for their children, anything like that, like helping somebody find shelter, anything like that that can help somebody in any way. And because you're able to, like some people are happy to look for ways to help people without making them feel like you're enabling them to be lazy in any way, right? So if you find anything like that, just try it. I promise you, you're going to find that in some way. And well, actually, you know what? Just think about it like this. People will argue, like cynics. They'll say, you know what? People who give charity just do it for the tax break. Okay, so what? That's already, you get to keep part of your money and share part of your money. What's wrong with that? That's perfectly fine. And it says that, like, if I was to say to somebody, you know what, giving charity doesn't diminish your wealth, there. In the secular world, you don't even have to go to the physical, metaphysical world, right? So things like that to me are just like, well, why? Think about another reason why we would want to be charitable, like it just in spirit, outside of your actual wealth. And you'll never find a reason not to try to be. So in the Arabic word, the word zakah is usually referred to as charity, but what it means is a purification or a type of cleansing. So what it's meant to do actually is to clear your life or your wealth, as it were, from anything that might corrupt it. So if you think, like what we were talking about the previous video, if I'm trying to understand now, there's like so many meanings, and oh my gosh, yeah, I literally can't assume that I'm going to be going to work and then someone's going to crash into me. Like, I could be a good driver, but someone could crash into me, and then there was, you know, maybe I lose a limb and I'm somehow struggling for the rest of my life. So a way to prevent those kinds of incidences from our life could be to do this kind of charity, because it's almost like if we have a certain amount of wealth allotted in a lifetime, it's going to be spent regardless. Like it might be, you might assume this much money is going to be not for me to spend with. It's somehow going to go outside of any kind of direct benefit to me. If I don't give it to charity, it's going to go somewhere else. So it might end up actually being, you know, medical expenses, right? So if you think of it in that regards, it's almost like, yeah, I'd probably rather go to something that's going to be charitable, because then we both win. And that's kind of the way I think metaphysics works and how religion works, and sometimes why people associate themselves as spiritual but not religious, is that they might say, I have a habitual way of thinking about the universe that is greater than just what people talk about when they refer to God or religion, on the surface anyway. So I don't feel like I want to orient in any way with like an affiliated organized religion, because it's just, it looks like too much work and I never understand it, and we just get into conflict about the existence of God, and any kind of excuse from there is pretty much like a valid one, could be. So from there is kind of where I would kind of give direction for people who are just looking for kind of, I am in a postmodern world and I do want to understand a new way of understanding life and myself, and I just want to kind of go about it kind of like in a skim kind of like preview, and then I'll decide from there like what direction I'll go. And I think that's basically like the best advice. I know I do look like I'm getting really, really particular within Islam, but it's just because that's the faith that I grew up with, and it's the tradition I am very comfortable with speaking about. Speaking about anything other than that, other than to kind of compare it in a way that, you know, this is kind of comparable and it's kind of similar, I kind of stay away from, just so that I don't offend anybody who might be within that tradition and holds it in some kind of regard that, you know what, we do it a little bit different, and I'd rather that they kind of speak about it if they choose. So without thinking about the negative in the world, assume that already we're not perfect. No. So we are aware now that we're infallible. We don't have to talk about original sin. It's just that we can purify ourselves, but because we make mistakes in the world, a way to, and sometimes unknowingly, a way to kind of clear ourselves from that can be to give charity, right? Because it's almost like I could, for example, get in an accident and it wasn't really my fault. Like I swerved to maybe not run over an animal, and by accident I crashed into a car, right? So that person might be like, in their mind, grumbling against me, which creates negative energy for me. And it's just like, it was like I'm sorry, it was an accident. Like it wasn't like so in that scenario, it could become something that's, it's almost like a way of diffusing some bad karma from our ancestors. So in one of my videos, I was talking about how sometimes 3 or 4 generations back, something might have happened in my personal history and I have to pay for it right now, right? Someone might argue, like, that's not even fair. I don't even know I believe in that. So my argument and response is, I have no choice but to. This is my reality, and I can't explain it in any other way. So having this current scenario now where I crashed into somebody and then they're thinking negatively about me, that could actually stunt a lot of what I might have otherwise endured. So let's assume in my past, I came from a clan where they were assassins, right? I hope not. But I now have like a lot of negative karma behind me, right? To only have it affect somebody in a kind of like maybe they have whiplash, and that's the extent of it. Like imagine the difference, right? That's just like, so that's basically what charity does. It's known to diffuse God's fury or the universe's fury. Like it's almost like a way. And when you think about it logically, it is, because if I am in somehow improving someone's condition and somehow, their affect in the world is just going to be better. So even if you don't want to think about God or you don't want to think about hell as a place, it's just a state of being. And if you're somehow helping somebody in some kind of well-being or overall healthy way, then that's it. They're just going to have like a better understanding of life, and then that's just going to have like a kind of concentric effect outwards. And so knowing that we're not perfect and we shouldn't kind of take on that kind of rhetoric in our mind of like, why do I deserve this? And changing it instead with, I'm glad it wasn't worse than this. Like, I mean, this could have been much worse. Kind of creates that sense of, oh, I should remember to be grateful, which in itself was gratitude. But now you're consciously thinking of, I'm happy that, this was the extent of it and it could have been worse. So this is just something to kind of remember when we are going through sustained hardship, like when it becomes just distress in our life. Doing something such as enduring a hardship to remove karma is almost like, maybe I should give charity. Like maybe I should do something good, and that'll help alleviate maybe some of this stress in my life. And that also kind of gives you a proactive approach into life. So it's not like I'm just going to sit here and take this, because I mean, what other options do I have? Like be proactive, like say, what do I have to lose? If everything's just this difficult, like, do I have anything to lose really by trying to kind of proactively do something helpful or charitable in some way? So giving that a try is not going to diminish in any way other than to help you. And because we know that gratitude kind of instills good karma, it'll help in an overall way kind of help you think of the different ways you can be creative with charity. So for example, starting a YouTube channel, right? That's something that's for you personally, like it's a stress relief. It could be kind of journaling, but you're also sharing anecdotal experiences or human experiences, and people love those because that's the way we learn. Like that is the phenomena of sociology that we love. Like just hearing people's stories, like television, entertainment, that's like a completely different standard of living than kind of focusing just on a narrative of this is what I believe about God and this is how I have to be, and that's it. Like you don't allow yourself any kind of recreation in any way. And so think about this if as a perspective of somebody who believes in reincarnation. So if you already assume that I know I am going to be reborn in the future for, I don't know, several centuries, because it looks like that like final death is not a thing. What would you want to do to help your future self, already knowing that you're going to be your descendant, like just by nature, even if you don't have children, like you're still in somehow in like the global family, right? So you're not going to be able to escape your own or someone else's. But by doing something for your actual personal self improves your conscious karma in the next life, right? Whatever it ends up being. So something that will exponentially grow for you even after you pass away, that is going to almost be waiting for you to claim when you do come back to life, are three things. One of them is beneficial knowledge. So if you are already creating meaning for some kind of understanding that sustains itself through time, anybody who learns that and practices it and evolves with it is already like in pretty good shape, right? So if you think of Einstein, that can go in a lot of directions, right? Because we had, even if you think of like the nuclear wars, for example, we've kind of gone past that now to different ways of understanding clean energy, for example, right? So it's almost like we have to take the good with the bad. We can't just assume that everything is going to have either like an absolutely good existence in the world or absolutely bad. They definitely have to kind of coexist. Another one is an ongoing endowment. So sometimes it's kind of like an education fund. Sometimes it'll kind of overlap actually with beneficial knowledge, right? So you start that for your kids or for someone else, or uh, planting a tree, right? That's like creating a shelter or like a home for animals, right? It's really that simple. You don't have to overthink it. And then kind thoughts about our ancestors. So being grateful for the efforts that were made in the past to help education and knowledge kind of grow, and making it accessible so that we can continue through time, evolve and build who we are. So that's it. This is what I've witnessed. What have you witnessed?